Alright guys, now we're here with Ameena Hussein, the author of Zilij and many other books. But for today, we're going to be focusing on Zilij. So Ameena, tell me about the process of writing this wonderful book. What inspired you? What maybe lit that spark in you to start writing this, to go on writing this?
Hello, Talita, and it's an honor to be here with you at the Ceylon Lit Festival.
Yeah.
And so, actually, I should tell you, this is my second book of my second collection of short stories. And it's funny you ask me about this book because this book was written in Switzerland.
Oh,
It was written I had got married and I went to live with my husband in Geneva. And I wanted 1 year off. I wanted a 1 year break. And during that year, when I was living in Geneva, I decided, okay, I have these thoughts and stories running around my head.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can put them down. So, because I had also just left Sri Lanka, they're very influenced by Sri Lanka as well as my life in Geneva. So, what happens is, I'm not a fast writer. A lot of the story goes on in my head and I kind of map it out a little bit. So an idea will come in. I'll hear someone say something. I'll see an incident. So the first story, which is An Ordinary Death.
Yes.
My parents used to live in New Zealand and I was running a house in Sri Lanka, and I had this fruiterer who would come because I was lazy to do my marketing, would come to the house. I was really shocked and upset to discover that he had passed away very tragically. And I took that event with me to Geneva, and when I was there, I started thinking, I want to write about how, somebody going about their daily work, they're not important, they're not a politician, they're not a public figure, but they get caught up in these public events. And there is a wife, a mother, a child who is grieving for this anonymous person who has got caught up and tragically passed away.
Yeah.
And so then that's how that story came, An Ordinary Death. Because it also affected me, because I knew him, we had a very, very friendly, cordial relationship.
Yeah.
And I was very affected by that. It's like how fleeting life is when you live in a war-torn country. We can see that happening now in Gaza, and
trivial these things have become, but they're so deep. Yeah?
They're so deep. And what's happening is sometimes the world gets very anesthetized because there's so much of violence going on around. And I feel that it happened in Sri Lanka as well. So it's a reclaiming and a telling of a story. And then it's just life around me. So how I get ideas. I'm even here at the festival, I'm wandering about, I overhear conversations, I see a person, I like the way they look, or they have an interesting face. And then
yes, one thing I've noticed about your books is it carries a lot of mundane realism. It's actually really beautiful, like the little things that we forget to actually focus a little hard on. We see that you've observed them very clearly. So in that aspect of your storytelling, how do you think that impacts the general public's maybe perception of real world events, real world things that happen and have happened for a long time?
So I have to tell you, for me, fiction does many things. But the primary thing is actually I use this word loosely, entertain, right? I use it loosely because I don't mean to trivialize what anyone is writing about. But for someone to start a story and finish a story, it has to be gripping enough that they will stay with the story. And fiction for me is one of the best vehicles to talk about so many serious things. I know that there are people who say, oh, I don't read fiction. It's not serious enough for me. I only read non-fiction.
Yeah.
But through fiction, you can talk about human rights, you can talk about women's rights, you can talk about childhood experiences, you can talk about the changing world that goes on. And so in my book, someone might read it 50 years from now and say, I didn't know Sri Lanka was like this.
Yes.
And it's a documentation. So if I do it well, if people can read it and they can learn something from it, if it can be thought-provoking, if it can be entertaining also, if they can laugh, if they can say, oh, my mother is like this, or you know, I used to do these things, then I think the story has worked.
Absolutely. And your stories have worked, because I see little girls, little boys, even I saw so many teenagers pick up your books yesterday.
I'm so happy if that happens, because sometimes, so you know, I wrote a novel, The Moon in the Water, and that has some adult issues as well. And at the book fair is where I meet my reading public. And there was a 13-year-old boy who came and he wanted to buy this book. And I told his mother, you know, there are certain scenes, I'm not sure if you want him to read about it. And she's like, no, he's a very mature 13-year-old and I think it's fine. Yeah. So I was thrilled, because I do want people to be able to read any sort of fiction, not just mine, everybody's piece of you know, creative work that they put out, and to understand, to hopefully understand a little bit more about the world, a little bit more about human nature.
I think they'll learn more than a little bit more, definitely. There's so much in your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, and well, stepping a little bit back from your work, making this a little more easier. How has your experience been at the English Literary and Arts Festival?
Superb.
Yeah.
For me, there can never be too many literary festivals.
Oh, yeah.
I just love them all. It's my work, it's my job. It's how also our writers get exposed. Yeah. It's also how it's so inspiring to. Now at 4 o'clock, I'm doing a young writers. It's not a workshop, but it's like a young writers session. We're going to have, I think, 18-year-olds to 29-year-olds who would like to be writing, and Sean Otto and myself are going to be talking to them. I'm out of all my panels, I'm so excited about that one, because that's where you see the future. And
absolutely,
our hope lies in the future.
Agreed, completely agreed. I think you're making a great impact on the coming generation, and I think you're changing a lot of perspectives of the generation before. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for being so kind. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you.
It's really lovely to be at the festival.
All right.
Thanks, Alisa.
Thank you, Ameena.